My name is Michael Coates. I'm a former firefighter, but I'm also a former soldier. And it's the stories from the individuals within this military community that I'm desperate to document. In this episode, we speak with a fast jet pilot who was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. We talk about his operations in Syria and Iraq, what it takes to perform at your best, and why preparing for the worst allowed him a shot at a moving target. We also speak about psychological fitness, mental ill health, and his mother's suicide. From skiing at the Olympics to the speed of sound. Episode 55, Roger Cruickshank. This is Declassified. What's your first childhood memory?
So I remember being a little ninja on a pair of skis and thinking I was absolutely loving this. Right, this is skiing, and I'm getting into it. And then the next thing I know, I've sort of gone and twisted my knee. I've ended up on my face, and then I'm a screaming mess on the ground. I've got the ski instructor, the one who's trying to teach me, running up to me, and my dad, my peripheral vision, running up to me as well. So I was 5, and that was my second ever skiing lesson.
Has skiing always been part of your life?
To be honest, after that, it wasn't for a long time, because I didn't actually get back onto skis until I was 9. So I remember trying to beg my parents, my mum and dad, that I wanted to get back on skis because all my mates were talking about it. And obviously, even after that short spell of it, I had obviously loved it, and I wanted to get back on the skis. So my dad, he's always skied. My mum did a bit as well, but my dad was always a keen skier up in Bonnie, Scotland, up in the Lecht in Glenshee. But then after that point, from 9 years old, that was it. It was absolutely part of my life. I lived and breathed to ski and to be as fast as I could on a pair of skis. Let's
go back. So you're born in 1982. Whereabouts?
So I was born in the Netherlands. Actually, that was because of my dad working on the rigs. So he was an oil worker for over 35 years. But at that stage in his life, the job took him to Holland. So that's where I was born, lived there for 3 years, and then came back to Bonnie, Scotland after that in 1985.
And then what, says you, mum, dad?
Yeah, that's right. And then my 2 sisters as well came along. 2 younger sisters. One's a year and a half younger than me, and then the other one is about 10 years younger.
So a big gap. Was you close as a family?
Yeah, very close. Yeah. To be honest, I guess to get right into it, we had a very strong individual dynamic, so for example, I was very close to my dad and my mum individually, but I wouldn't say that I had the most happy upbringing, and that was because of my mum and dad constantly fighting, really, and never, I never would see any show of affection between them. And it would be the young kids not wanting to get out of bed in the morning because you'd hear the fighting going on, and I'm not talking about fisticuffs or anything, nothing like that. It was just the arguing, and the same in the evening trying to get to sleep, and you'd be hearing that in the other room. So I have to bring that back to say that I had a wonderful upbringing with so close to my sisters, my mum and my dad, but they really stayed with each other for the kids until we got to a certain age, and then they parted ways.
And what did mum do for a living?
She was a nurse, yeah. So she worked for the NHS for, again, over 35 years.
Was she caring?
Yeah, she was very caring, yeah. I mean, she was a very strong woman who wouldn't... She would say, how she felt, and she would always be willing to help. But for example, she was a nurse at the end of the day, so she would tackle problems in that way. So I remember doing some rollerblading up at Glenmore, up in the Cairngorms in Scotland, and I fell and it went down pretty hard, and I was trying to show off. I was trying to do some big jumps where I definitely shouldn't have been doing big jumps. It was way above my ability, and landed and did that typical thing where I landed and my feet just went out from underneath me. I went straight onto my side and just ripped all the skin off my upper thigh and the side. And of course, Mum was there, and straight away she's rubbing the grit out of me as I'm sort of screaming my eyes out. And of course, it was the right thing to do. And she was a nurse, so she was like, "Well, you have to get the grit out out of your leg. It's as simple as that. But then, yeah, she was very caring, and she was very, wanted to get the most out of her kids.
And what were your parents arguing about?
Usually money, I guess, was probably the most poignant thing, and it was always a factor, mainly because as I got older, then the ski racing that I was doing was very, very expensive, and there wasn't any sponsorship. I had the local petrol station. They were amazing. They were giving me 100 quid, every 6 months or so, which was at the time incredible because no one else was giving me that, and it was just someone trying to help. But for us as a family, my dad did okay on the oil rigs, and my mum was a nurse, obviously not well paid at all for crazy hours. And with my sisters as well, there wasn't really much to get me going abroad all the time and staying in hotels. So that was quite often the focus of the arguments.
Did you ever feel guilty at the time that was a thing?
Oh, massively. Yeah, there was a massive sense of guilt, which is actually what drove me to join the Air Force. Because, for example, I would come back from being in Austria ski racing or on a ski camp or something, with the Scottish team and I would come back and my sisters would be wanting to get a stereo or something for their birthday or something important. And, they wouldn't be able to get the one they want. So it would be either wouldn't be able to get it or it would be a rubbish one. And really that was very obvious that came to me. Now, it's not as if my parents were making that obvious of me. They weren't putting that pressure on me. But as I grew older and a bit more aware of what was happening, then I realized that this just wasn't fair. And it got to the point where my parents nearly went bankrupt, just purely trying to support me through skiing. So yeah, there was a huge amount of stress there. That was in the family, and actually, it's funny how it's affected me in the future of how money and finances can really change your outlook and how you perceive certain situations just because of the stress of money.
Well, let's talk a bit about then. So let's say you were 13, you're involved with skiing competitively at this age, is that right? 13?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So really, actually, at the age of 9, I joined a race team, which was purely just to learn to ski. But the best place to learn to ski was to join the race team. And that's how I got into it. So actually from the age of 9, 10, I was constantly non-stop racing. Yeah. And that was from the local team, which was the Afford dry ski slope team, or the Afford Race League, I think it was called, into the Gordon skiers, into the British children's team, into the Scottish children, then seniors team, and then into the British junior and then senior team.
And what year was you in the senior team then?
So it was actually, I got into the team just pretty much as I applied to join the Air Force. So that was in 2000 when I found out that I had a place on initial officer training to start with the Air Force, as well as then finding out that I was being selected to start with the British ski team, the British senior ski team. 2001, you joined the RAF. That's right.
Were your mum and dad proud that you did that?
Yeah, absolutely. But there was, my parents and I were torn because, yes, I was joining the Air Force, but I was having to let go of my career as a ski racer. That my parents and my sisters, they'd all put a lot of time and money and sacrifice into me going as far as I could with the ski racing, to then just to have to give it up because, well, my parents were, as I said, nearly going bankrupt. I mean, they were right on the verge. And it just became like, well, it was a no-brainer. I couldn't continue with the skiing, and it wasn't fair on my sisters. And I always wanted to be a pilot. And I was very lucky, hugely grateful for being given the opportunity to join the Air Force. So I took it with no intention of thinking I was going to continue skiing, apart from maybe trying to compete for the RAF team. So
how does it work then with regards to kind of becoming a pilot? So I'm assuming you go to uni, get a degree, then join. How does it work?
No, so actually, I mean, it does change. So I'm not that current on what you need nowadays to get in. But back in the day, when I joined, 20 odd years ago, we just needed, I think it was 3 hires or 3 A-levels, and one of them had to be English. So I remember the day getting my results through, and I just managed to scrape through English and get a C. So, and then the rest I got, I think, an A and a B. So I was like, yeah, we're good. I got a ticket to join the Air Force. But then obviously there's a very sort of intricate and complex selection process where you certainly need a bit of luck. You know, I'll never forget, and this is another absolute standout memory, when I was there at RAF Cranwell for selection, and the interviews had gone all right. I was, I was just scared really, and young, and trying to impress wherever I could and probably sound a lot more intellectual than I was. I was completely wet behind the ears. But the thing that really stood out is when I went to see the doctor, and the doctor informed me that I had failed the hearing test. So I regret to inform you, Roger Cruickshank, but you can no longer continue to go on and be a pilot. But in that moment, as I went to leave the room, pretty much to break down into tears, because I was so passionate about joining the Air Force, and I'd got quite far at that point, through the process. And then there was a bit of like a cough or a splutter, and the doctor went, "Oh, hey, sorry, Mr. Cruickshank, have you got a bit of a cold?" And I went, "Yeah, I've been suffering with a cold for a few days." "Ah, well, let's reassess this, because your cold can affect your hearing. So I'll tell you what, let's continue this, and then next time you come back for the further selection, then let's do another hearing test." And yeah, here I am.
Was it one of the ones where you were just in a box and you're going beep,
yeah, exactly.
Left and right?
Yeah, that's right, exactly that, which we've had to do every year of my entire career.
Right, they're the most stressful things.
I know,
pressing
exactly.
buttons, mystery beeps.
That's
coming
right.
in
And you don't want to breathe because you think you might miss the beep. Yeah.
So, bit of luck there. And then where from there then? So you then go to school, then go to basic training. What do you have to do? You go through a process with everybody first? How does it?
Yeah, that's right. So to become a pilot in the Air Force, you've got to be an officer. So, very much they see it as you're an officer first, and then you go on to become a pilot. So you go through the training, officer training, or IOT, initial officer training at RAF Cranwell, which at the time was a 6-month course. And, as you know, I'm sure you've heard from, other people on this fine podcast, it's a pretty full-on selection process, the course itself. Especially when, I was 18, didn't know how to iron a shirt or polish shoes or anything. But getting through IOT, and, I had some great experiences, met some amazing people taking me under their wing. There was a mate of mine who was 35, and he was an ex-ranker, so he'd been in already for 10 years. So there he was, like at 2 a.m, helping me to bull my shoes and everything. So managed to get through that course, did okay. And then I went to RAF Lookers to effectively wait there to start my flying training course, so EFT, elementary flying training.
Do you have to pass tests throughout?
Yeah.
Or do they know you're going to flying training afterwards?
Oh, there's the initial selection process, which is to figure out, ascertain whether you have the aptitude to become a pilot. So therefore, when they've identified that, then right, you're good to start IOT officer training as a pilot. But then they train you up as an officer, and then you are good enough to start flying training.
Okay, right.
So then, as I was waiting for flying training, it was actually at the end of the officer training at Cranwell, and someone got in touch with me, Flight Attendant Mike Waring at the time, and he was like, "Oh wait, Cruickshank, we heard you're a bit of a skier, so any chance you can come and represent the Air Force? Primarily want to beat the Army because they're always winning, and we really need you at the inter-services." So then that conversation began. I was like, yeah, I'd love to get back on skis, and especially if I'm just waiting for my flying training, it makes sense. But then it turned out that I had to actually delay my flying training so that I could attend the RAF Ski Champs and the Inter-Service Ski Championships as well. But I decided to do that because it was in my interest to get back on skis and to sort of get into that scene, because I wanted to continue my ski racing as well. Everyone says, and still does, that joining the military is a great way to continue with your adventure training and to get outdoors, to go and see places. And actually joining the ski team was a perfect thing for that. So as I got out to the RAF Ski Championships, and then I started to do all right, because I'd been effectively a professional ski racer, and then come into this scene where it is amateur, but then people who are so hungry for it, and I loved it. I loved it because this isn't something that people are just doing every day, because it's almost, ski racing on the British team, it's kind of your job. So there's a lot of expectations on you, and you're just constantly trying to deliver. But in the RAF ski team, these are people who do all sorts from all ranks of the Air Force, the military. So therefore, everyone's just hungry to be as fast as they can, and they really enjoy it. They're really hungry for it. So I loved it. And yeah, that's why I've been doing lots with the ski team for years now. But through that process, I got sort of headhunted by some of the senior officers who were out there. And the one thing that stands out, and this is a memory that's always replayed back to me by some of my friends in the ski racing world. And they said they saw me in this race where on, I think it was the 5th gate of a 60 gate course in a slalom, and I hooked a gate, which means when you hit the gate right on the tip of your ski, my ski pinged off. So I've now got one ski on. But rather than stopping to go and walk back and get my ski back on, I decided it would be faster just to complete the course on one ski. And because you get to a point where you do a lot of practice on one ski, because obviously you then have 2 skis and it's easier. So you through the training, you actually spend a lot of time messing around on one ski. So I completed the course, and I think I won by about 4 seconds. And and at the time it was just, that's something that was just bread and butter to me. That was what I did. I was a ski racer, and I loved it. And that then, of course, made me stand out to some of the senior officers who were like, "Who is this guy?" And then they heard about my time with the British ski team. And then this incredible opportunity arose, through the senior officers. And, I take my hat off to those who stuck their neck out for me and said, yeah, Cruickshank, he needs to continue on with the British ski team. So through that process, instead of starting flying training, the Air Force actually granted me a 4-year sabbatical to compete and train with the British ski team until the 2006 Olympics. So that was the deal, is that I would follow the British ski team program, every as and when required, just the normal program. But then every time I was at home, I would be working with the Air Force, doing things like I was working in the air show office up at RAF Lookers, organising all the logistics, all the aircraft and air crew for the Lookers air show, and I did that about 3 or 4 years, as well as being a flight safety assistant officer. I was working as an operations officer on the different squadrons, getting to learn about hopefully my future career.
But the basics of this is you join the RAF 2001.
Yeah.
You go through officer training. You then you start waiting for your flight training.
Yeah.
Then you get totally removed from that for 4 years.
Yeah.
To train with the British ski team.
Yeah.
When you're not with the British ski team, you're doing kind of different kind of officer roles.
Yeah.
Junior officer roles, and competing for the RAF as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Combined service.
Exactly. Competing for the Air Force, taking down the army, which we did a couple of times. So it was a really good time. So it meant that I could keep the skiing going, but from the Air Force perspective, there was a lot of recruitment, and recruitment that I still do to this day. As in a lot of people who contact me and say, how can I continue my sport, whatever it may be, and still continue on in the military? And then I would just tell them about my story and give them, ideas and what will work, what won't, because there's no way I could really go head on into my flying training as well as doing the skiing career as well. That's hence why I had to be segregated. I had to finish and complete my skiing career to then go on to the flying. 2005, you broke your leg. Yeah, so that's when things took a bit of a turn for the worse. It was a case of when I got given this opportunity, very much deep down, I never had a lot of self-confidence or self-assurance as a young guy. And I found myself being given this opportunity to go to the Olympics. But when I looked at it, I was like, I am nowhere near the criteria, for making the Olympics. Yeah, I made the British ski team, but I was nowhere near the top of the tree in the UK. But actually, through given the opportunity and the time and just training as hard as I could, then I got faster and faster. And I actually had my best ever result out in Lake Louise out in Canada, and in a North American Cup, which was like the one tier down from the World Cup. World Cup obviously being the top. I finished third, and it was just an incredible experience because, yeah, I'd been getting faster and faster, but I hadn't been doing any big races. And I'll never forget, I had a really rough and ready run, crossed the finish line and looked up, and I just heard the commentator first gasp and then saying, "Oh, and this guy's from Britain." And then I saw someone step off the podium, and the guy who stepped off the podium, I think it was John Cachera, and he ended up being a world champion. So it was my moment where I was rubbing shoulders with the big guys, and and I had just sort of elevated into that world class time in my skiing career. But then, of course, as the roller coaster began, one of the points, about 2 or 3 months later, I then had a really nasty accident racing in Germany in an international ski race, but it was nothing really that I needed. It was just race experience.
And this was for Team GB, was it?
It was, yeah. And I felt it was a classic ski racing accident where I fell on my inside and I was sliding on the ice. But then that can happen because of the angles that you create. So what often people do, ski racers do, is they use your inside hand to like push yourself up and then jab your edges back into snow again so you can continue. But as I did that, my outside leg and ski caught into some really soft, like a big mound of powder snow, and then that forced my leg to hyperextend, so go the wrong way and then twist over itself. And I just rolled over this leg that had gone the wrong way a couple of times, and as you can imagine, screaming in agony, and then got taken off the hill. And over a period of a couple of weeks, they discovered that actually I'd punched my femur into my tibial plateau. So in other words, the top of my shin bone had been compressed like honeycomb, and they had to use 9 titanium pins and a titanium plate. So the plate's about half the length of my shin, and they used the 9 titanium plates to provide almost like a scaffolding to hold it in position. So that is then obviously took me out about 10 or 11 months before the Olympics.
And how was you feeling?
I was absolutely gutted, and I'll never, at the time, I went into, this is fine, I can get back on skis in a couple of months, so let's just crack on, let's get on with the rehab, because to be honest, I've broken myself, I've broken loads of bones in ski racing and various things, and so this was just another accident that I had to get over. But then, of course, when the surgeon sat me down, initially before the operation, he said, "Rog, look, I'm sorry, mate, but I can't tell from all the different scans we've had, all the MRIs, the CT scans, I can't figure out what is going on inside your leg." And this was a top surgeon in the UK. I was very lucky that the British ski team had Bupa insurance. This guy, Andy William, absolute legend, he was very frank with me. He said, "I need to go in and have a look around. I'm going to do an arthroscopy. And if I find something that I deem necessary to operate on straight away, then I will go for it." So then, that's in the end what happened is I think I went into theatre about midnight, and I remember waking up at about sort of 4 a.m, come to from all the morphine and drugs, and him sort of shaking me and saying, "Oh, all right, mate. Well, it turns out that you've got a lot of metal work in there now, mate." And then I passed out again, and then woke up in the hospital bed a few hours later, and with the blood drip out of my leg, and then the sort of pressing the button for the nurse to come, and the nurse comes, and I'm like, what's going on? Like, what happened? And then, of course, they then start to tell me and show me the X-ray and things, and I've got all this brand new metalwork in my leg. So yeah, that was pretty horrific to then discover how bad the accident actually was, what had actually gone on in my leg, and then to have the surgeon. So the next day a few days later, I went to see him, and he said, "Rog, I'm really sorry, but I have to give you the absolute honest truth. And this is not me as a surgeon trying to give you the worst case scenario. This is fact. What has happened is that femur's punched into your tibial plateau. I've had to rebuild the tibial plateau, so rebuild the top of your shin bone using bone from your pelvis and a lot of metal work. And now it means that that joint is going to be alien to your body. So therefore, I'm hoping that I've done a good job. I certainly tried my absolute best. I worked on there for as long as I could and as hard as I could for the time that I have with the drugs and everything. So, I hope you've done you proud, but mate, you're never going to ski race again. You're always going to walk with a limp. And then of course, I'm also thinking about my RAF career, my flying career, and that I know is gone. That's just because if I can't walk, then I can't evade from the enemy. So how am I going to become a pilot? So I do remember very clearly keeping a brave face to the surgeon, asking lots of questions, saying, there must be a way. I can surely get over this. I can train, I can physio every day for a year. I don't care what it takes. What can I do? So, he answered those questions as eloquently as he could, but I could tell he was adamant that it was too far gone. So I went into the local cubicles and just broke down into tears. I was just absolutely gutted because everything I dreamed for, there was a newspaper article from when I was 10, of me saying, my dream is to go to the Olympics and ski race in the Olympics, and then I want to be a Typhoon pilot. So that was all the way back then. And now all those things were just gone. But I remember specifically getting through that grief and those tears. And then there was one thing that stood out to me, which was someone else. It was Hermann Maier, an Austrian ski racer who had something similar. He had a motorbike accident and smashed his leg, but he managed to get on skis. And it was like the talk of the town that he incredibly managed to get back on skis and start winning races again. So he was like top in the world, and he got back to being top in the world. So I was like, well, if he can do it, everyone was saying it was a miracle that he managed to get back onto skis and compete at the high level again. So why can't I? And I just took that very stubborn mindset and I accepted that it was going to be, obviously very tough to get back on skis, but I wasn't going to listen to anyone unless the curtain was drawn, I guess.
And was the Olympics still on your mind, or was it like, no, let's save the RAF career? Yeah,
the Olympics was very much on my mind, yeah, because
How far away was that?
It was 10 months. Yeah, so I was, if you can imagine, because I'd just qualified and I just had the elation of qualifying and then all the buzz of the media and everything, then I realised that I have to try everything to get back into skis. But then it turned out, because of the extent of my injury, that the British Olympic Committee took away my qualification, which you could say is fair, I guess, because the fact that the extent of the injury would mean that I didn't really have time to compete and prove my worth again. So they didn't want to have someone who was, 50% of their actual true ability to then go to the Olympics and not perform and really make the UK look bad is probably their way of looking at it. So I had to re-qualify. But of course, the time was ticking because I only had 10 months. And, a lot of the people were saying, well, we don't think you're going to get back on skis anyway. But long story short, in 6 months, I managed to get back on the skis. The doctor was saying it was a miracle. I had this big hoofing knee brace on my left leg. I had some serious concoctions of, ibuprofen really to get me through the pain. I had a awesome high performance coach who was helping me getting through the mental aspect of it, because I had a lot of demons. Every time I would lean over on my left leg, to put that pressure on the left ski, I would get some sharp pain. But then of course my body would associate that sharp pain with like danger, and then it would sort of collapse, and I wouldn't be able to ski properly. You obviously can't ski like that if you can't put pressure through your downhill ski. So I managed to get back to skis. I got faster and faster. I was training like a madman as hard as I could. Wonderfully, the Air Force gave me the time. I had some great bosses at the time who were just like, Rod, just concentrate on getting yourself back to fitness so that you can get to the Olympics and you can get into the flying training. So they gave me that space. I was pretty much in full time.
So that's risky as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
You start messing up again, you go down again in the Olympics.
Exactly.
That's the RAF done.
That's the thing. And it was a decision that I had to make, and I had to pay close attention to what the doctors were saying. But actually, because of the extent of metalwork, they're like, well, there's only so much that can go wrong now, because you've got all that metalwork in there supporting your leg as it is. So, but then they did say, if it goes really bad, you've got now a tangle of metal and bone. It's not going to go well.
Is it a selfish decision that then? Or is it in respect to parents have invested, you've had all these great bosses invest in, was it for other people or was it selfish for you?
I think it was actually a combination, because there was the people who were saying that it can't be done. And then there was the people who were saying, Rog, you can do this. This is what you've always dreamt of. And so, I had a lot of fans in my corner. My mum, my dad, my physio, Sandy Lyle, they were all very much in my court saying, you can do this, Rog. You can get back on skis. And to be honest, off on a tangent, that was one of the happiest times of my life. I felt so content, because all I had to worry about was being the best I could be, eating, sleeping, breathing the Olympic qualifications. All I could think about. So every squat I did, every length in the pool, because I couldn't run or walk on my leg to start with. Every I was having to walk around with a crutch for a while, or obviously crutches for a while, and then a walking stick for a while, and I actually had to teach myself how to walk again, which is really bizarre, because my body had forgotten. But not only had my body forgotten, it was because I had this like alien feeling in my leg. I couldn't extend it normally like as much as I could extend it before because of the operation, the damage in there. So it was quite a time where all I had to focus on was getting back on skis, and then all I had to focus on was trying to ski as fast as I could. And no one thought I could make it. So as they say with the underdog, all I had to worry about was just trying to be the best. I didn't have anything to prove apart from to myself, because everyone was saying that you can't do it.
What was it like then to get on the flight to the Olympics? It stemmed from the moment. So it was in the last possible opportunity I had, which is a Europa Cup, which is this race. It was the last opportunity, the last race. So every man and his dog from all over the world was competing in this race to try and get that Olympic spot, because all the countries only have so many spots. So they're all trying to outdo each other. And then you have this long streak of piss who's trying to compete just to qualify. Because there was myself and Finlay Mickle, and he was the number one. So we were the speed skiers. And I remember vividly in the start gate, just clicking my poles. That was always what I did. I would visualize the course, click my poles over the start wand, and I would say, fuck it, let's have some fun. And I went for it. I had a scrappy run, but I was letting the skis run. I was going for it. I had halfway down the course, I had a moment where I actually fell on my inside again on the ice. This horrible flashback. It probably helped me because it spurred my adrenaline, even more than it was before from doing a fast-paced downhill run. And then continued on. There was a big 70-meter flight, as in big 70-meter jump down into the finish. He landed, and then about 2 seconds later crossed the line. And all I can see in front of me is my physio, Sandy. She's just going nuts. She's just jumping like hands all over the place. And I'm like, oh, what's going on here? Have I done it? Looked up at the scoreboard, and there I was, 17th, and I had to get a top 20 to qualify. And in the end, it was like hundredths of a second. But this is why I believe in mental fitness and believing in yourself and not giving up, because everyone thought I couldn't make it. The head coach, the doctor, the surgeon, people close to me, they just didn't think I could do it. And I think I just was like, well, what else have I got to do? What else have I got to lose? I'm just going to keep trying. And then when the Olympics is over and I'm not there, then okay, that's the end point. But with that was about, I think, 2 weeks before the Olympics, and then there it was. And we won't go into the Olympics too much, but were you said content and happy a minute ago. Was you content and happy at that point? Once that had all been done and you'd done your runs and you had a respectable place in 2 events, did you feel like you'd made it? Feel like you'd done it?
I did. I really did, because of the achievement of the qualification, the second qualification again in the end, and then to be there to represent the team, to actually put down solid runs in both the downhill and Super G, and to be respected and rubbing shoulders, with some of the greats around me, because everyone knew it's a small group of people who are all competing at this high level, and when you're up there, you've made it. No one's trying to outdo each other. Well, apart from being faster on a set of skis, but actually, you all end up being good mates. And a lot of the guys who are who have become world champions are, my mates that I used to ski race with, so it was an amazing feeling to be there, to have that experience. But then it's really quite bizarre to then announce my retirement and to have a press conference at the age of 23 to say, right, I'm now done with ski racing. I'm now gone on to my flying training, my flying career.
So line drawn, Olympics is done.
Yeah.
Essentially the top of the pile, you're now at the bottom again.
Yeah.
How did you adapt to that? You're not a full-time athlete anymore. You're a full-time, totally focused on becoming a pilot. Was it always fast jet? Was it always fighter that you was going for?
Absolutely. I always wanted to fly Typhoon, actually. So that was and always had been my main ambition. I don't really know why. I think it comes from playing computer games when I was younger, and the Typhoon, the Eurofighter, was one of the aircraft that was out there.
How long's the Eurofighter been around? I just thought it was quite recent.
Oh, geez. I think the concept's been around for a long, long time, but when it became operational, it was probably around about 2004, 2005, I think. Yeah. But it has kept evolving very much over the years, with lots of different bits of kit and becoming a true multi-role fighter. So at the time, it was very much... a lot of people actually really struggle, that you've maybe heard before, when they come back from that high level. You are up at the top of the tree, and then all of a sudden you kind of lose your identity, coming away from being an athlete and having the cameras in your face and having this incredible experience. To then, I remember coming back and getting a cab in Edinburgh, and the guy didn't even realize that the Olympics was happening. So you start to go, oh yeah, this is not really a big deal in the general scheme of things. Yeah, it's just a bubble that you exactly end up being in. But then I was really lucky, because all of a sudden I took that focus that I had in the ski racing and put it firmly into the flying. Because, like I said, I've always dreamt of being a pilot, as well as a ski racer. It's just been two things that I've latched onto for whatever reason. I think primarily coming from my dad and different experiences. I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and now I had a chance. And I was so lucky, because actually, because of the damage to my leg, I really did manage to just, pardon the pun, but limp through the Olympics, and, with a lot of ibuprofen and a big old knee brace. So then there was no way I was going to have longevity with my leg to continue ski racing, as a longer career. So actually, to then jump ship and go into the flying training, I was so grateful for that opportunity, I tell you. I was so lucky to be in that position. Well,
it's actually knowing when to stop as well.
Yeah.
But also, like that dream and having a plan to implement that dream.
Yeah.
And then going in, so how long is flying training?
So, there's a lot of it in the media at the moment, but it can range from about 4 years to about 9 years. So it is a long old process. For me, I was in the flying training for about 4 years. Yeah, it was about 3 years actually, and then I became an instructor, so a flying instructor.
When do you get your wings? Like when you were a pilot?
So that for me, it has changed over the years, but that was actually when I was going through Linton-on-Ouse on the Tucano. So that was through the basic fast jet training. So at the end of that course, I then got my wings, and then went from there to RAF Valley to start on the Hawk, which is like the Red Hours, but the training black version of it, the same aircraft, the Hawk T1. And from there, I did that course. And don't get me wrong, I struggled when I was going through BFJT basic fast jet training on Tucano. And I felt pretty lucky that I got my wings, because there was quite a few tests that I'd failed. Had to use the skills that I learned from the ski racing to get back into the cockpit, into
the physical tests. I think up in the air.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So you're
getting tested all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got tests at all sorts of different stages. So, and the one that I failed, what was it called again? I think the basic flying test, BFT or something like that. So one of the sort of midway through, and I failed that twice, and then I had to actually sit the test with the chief instructor, chief flying instructor, and he was pretty much, as they called it, was on a chop ride. So if you don't pass that, then you're out. Maybe I would end up on different aircraft, like back onto multi-engine aircraft or helicopters, but I wouldn't continue as on jets. But luckily, I actually managed to excel. The guy put me at ease. He built me up. He said, look, you're just in a bit of a hole here. So let's go and have some fun. Let's go and fly. Let's focus on the enjoyment. Why are you here in the first place? Don't worry about this test. He really brought it out of me. And that's why I value the importance of instructing, because he's the one who actually gave me the space where I could be the pilot that I could be without fear of failure, because that's all it was. It was pure fear of failure that I'd gone through in all of my ski racing career. This shy kid who had no self-assurance, no self-confidence. And then I was just self-inflicting and second-guessing myself. That's why I failed those tests. But then, he gave me the opportunity to excel again. And then I struggled through the rest of that course, but passed it. And obviously, there's...
Can I ask you a question about the course?
Of course,
is there enough spaces for everybody, or are other people not wanting you to pass the other students? Or are you in it together? Like, I'll rephrase it. When you're a pilot going through training, are you there as a collective, or are you there as an individual?
It depends on the characters involved, because you're right in asking, is it, a number of spots? And actually the number of spots is dictated by you being there in the first place. In other words, they go, right, we're going to send some people to helicopters, some people to multi-engine, and some people to go jets. So it's the streaming process from there. And then that happens all the way to then dictate what aircraft you end up on. So from there, for me, actually, we were all in it together, just trying to get through that course. And luckily, I had a really good bunch of guys on that course, and girls, and we got through it together. And so when I was struggling, they would help me through it, and vice versa. And actually, that's what I always tried to foster with the people I was on the course with. Like, let's share the experiences. Let's figure out why you failed that trip. Let's be open and honest about why it went wrong for you.
So a couple of years in, so Olympics 2006, qualified as a pilot, like you said, like maybe 2008-ish. I want to jump us a little bit, and we're going to change tack, and I want you to tell me about when you found out that your mum had gone, your mum had died.
So that was well, I'll never forget it. I was, as you can imagine, I was standing with my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, and we were having this just sort of lovely walk. And prior to that, I'd received a text message from my dad, and it was a bit strange. It was a bit cryptic, and he had forwarded on a text message that he had received from my mum.
Were they together?
No, they were apart. They had divorced a couple of years prior to that, but they were still fairly amicable. Probably just so much for the kids, to make sure that we could all, continue on being a family, but with those two apart. And it was better for them to be apart. But I remember then responding to stopping the car, responding to his text message, thinking not too much of it, continuing on, and then going for a nice walk with my girlfriend, and then receiving this call where, my dad told me that mum had killed herself. And always surprises me how it gets me, but it, I just absolutely collapsed to the ground because the words were so alien to me. I couldn't, my mum had her struggles. She could be in very low places and have some, pretty big mood swings looking back. But then that was normal. That was the only normal that I ever knew. That was my mum, and we still loved her for it. We didn't know anything about, we as the family didn't know anything about mental health. We didn't understand why and where this was all coming from. But at that moment, it just seemed so alien because I never ever thought that she would do that she would take her own life. And I found myself, I just literally collapsed to the ground. I remember collapsing and then hearing the phone like bounce off the ground beside me, and then Katie picking up the phone and talking to my dad, very briefly before she then comforted me. And then I had to obviously gather my thoughts and get back up and get going, and then become the person strong enough to then tell my sister. So then I had to phone my sister to then give her the news, because my dad was busy with the police and the ambulance and everything that was ensuing at with my mum. So yeah, it's something that I could tell you, exactly all of the things happening around me. It just seems like it was yesterday, that moment, because it just seems so out of the blue.
How did your dad find out?
So he actually, based on this cryptic text message that he'd received from my mum, he then, with us as the kids kind of thinking, oh, wait a minute, that's a bit weird. Can you maybe just go and nip to mum's house? Because they didn't live far apart. And so he had discovered my mum's body. And he tried to resuscitate her, and it had been too long.
How long had she been by herself?
But no one really knows, but I think probably a good 4 or 5 hours or something. I think.
What effect did it have on your dad?
I think it was a case of he had to just be as strong as he could for his kids. So he went on to be as strong, as helpful, and do anything for us and just be there, which he was. So he, there was a lot of stuff that I'll probably never know what dad was going through, because we were all coping individually with our own levels of grief in different ways. But then we very much came together as a family, very close. So I straight away drove up north from where I was, drove all the way up to Scotland to be there with my sisters and with my dad, so that we could collectively, just support each other. And but I did find out from dad, well, not actually from himself, but from someone else, that he had, his partner at the time had actually discovered him, in the middle of the night, in a nightmare, resuscitating the bed. So he was obviously really suffering from that whole experience, and him having to find, her like that, because it wasn't as if they were enemies or anything. They were amicable, and they had all these amazing memories, as my dad has told me. After this whole, and we've talked about this. We tried as a family to be as open and honest about all of these experiences, so that we can understand and support each other and go forth with our lives.
And suicide, it's not. It's different, and they can be different emotions. Not just sadness you're dealing with, guilt, neglect.
Yeah, anger as well.
Yeah, pain.
Because, absolutely agree. And going through all of those emotions over years. And that's, I think, what I've had to come to terms with. This will never leave me. It'll never leave all the close people around my mum. And that sounds like it's damning, but it is. But at the same time, actually, this is life, and these emotions that come up, I know for a fact that I wouldn't bottle them up, but I would try and push them to the side. I would try and use meditation or something to get me away from this darkness. But over the years, I've learned that I need to accept that darkness. I need to accept those feelings of grief and those deep, dark, horrible holes. I need to actually go down into that hole, really feel that grief, accept it, and then I get out of it. I think that's what I've realized, and I've become such a campaigner for mental health, is because from being there and being in those really dark places, I've realized actually there is something to be done about it. And that's why I'm a firm believer in mental fitness. So what we're talking about here is suicide and all the horrible stuff that comes about with it. But actually, all the skills that I've learnt with dealing with my mental health have made me realize that there's a lot more to our mental fitness, and there's a lot more that we can do.
Your mum also went into crisis. She was at crisis point.
Yeah.
And whether or not people around her knew or not, what did she leave anything for you?
Yeah, there was, unfortunately, and very frustratingly at the time, the police had, or my dad knew that there was a suicide note, but the police had to take that into their custody for a couple of days before we could even read it. So yeah, there was a horrible sort of wait. And almost we felt that, there could be a clue to like why she took her own life. Maybe it's in the suicide note. It wasn't. And I don't think these things will ever be clear. There's never a specific reason. And there's a few things written in there, not really to go into now, but it didn't answer any questions. And I think that was the biggest thing as well, is that you will never know why with suicide. Because actually, it never really comes down to one specific thing. It can be a whole multitude of things that is affecting that person who's then gone to crisis and decided to make that decision.
Did she speak to you directly in the letter?
Yeah, she did. Yeah.
Did that give you comfort, or did it give you pain?
It gave me comfort, absolutely. But then pain at the same time, because we all have our individual relationships with our parents. But I would say that I was very close to my mum. I am very close to my dad, but I was very close to my mum because when my parents separated and then divorced, then with my sister being 10 years younger, then I ended up really having to help my mum with things that my little sister was going through. So therefore, I was having to support my mum, not in a way that would be normal for a son. But also, when I go back to, us chatting at the beginning, when I would hear my parents arguing, often when those arguments split up, I would become the mediator. So I would become the person who my dad would come to, and then my mum would come to, and then I would be having to pass messages to and fro. So that was the role that I was playing as the eldest in the family, or the eldest, and that, I guess, put me in a position where I became very, very close to mum, and we spoke, very much peer to peer about a lot of things, if you want to put it that way. So I was absolutely gutted that she never, ever opened up to me. But then there's one thing, and this is probably the driving force for my mental health campaigning that I've been doing since 2011. Because I remember when she, as a nurse has explained, she would do overnight shifts, and the overnight shifts were so hard on her, and they're so hard on everybody who does those. And I remember her coming back in the morning. It was a dark and dreary day, and she was really quite, tired from work. And I remember sitting in her kitchen, and it was, I could just sense from her mood that she was really low and not happy, and there was something definitely wrong. And I experienced this quite a lot with her, with these dark moods. But you know what? Everyone has dark moods and things that they go through. But I remember saying, and I had no knowledge of mental health, I had no understanding of it, but I remember asking, Mum, what's wrong? Can you please tell me where this is coming from? You just don't seem yourself. And she didn't really know how to answer. She acknowledged that she wasn't herself. And I said, well, maybe you can, talk to someone at work. Like, surely in all the people that you work with, is there not someone that you can talk to? And she said the line that will stick with me, which was, oh, no, I wouldn't be comfortable doing that. This is the people that I work with, so I can't, talk to them about that stuff. It just pings around my brain and always will. Not because I think there's something I can do about it now. Not as if I live in a life of regret of not doing something. I feel like at least I tried to do something then, but I didn't know enough about what could be done. But also it was the culture, and I'm not throwing spears or anything at the NHS and the people that was around her. It is a culture that we're getting better at, and getting people to know that they can be open and honest and discuss these feelings like it's normal, because it is normal. Our physical health, mental health should be as simple as talking about our physical health.
Not just that, or additional to that, is these environments where people are looking after and caring for people.
Yeah.
And they should be always on the ball because it's not about them, it's about someone else.
Yeah.
And that you were saying it then, that stigma of saying, actually, I don't feel great, can then lead you to things like crisis.
Yeah.
I hear it about a lot, especially with paramedics.
Yeah.
They go to crisis point and a lot, die by suicide. Was they with you, because then you're going back to this high performance environment, you're still in training, you don't qualify as a typhoon pilot until 2013, that's 3 years away. You're in this high performance environment. Is there any, I'll break it into parts, and I'm not putting words into my mouth, so you can just say what you need to say, but was there any shame? Was there any stigma around it? Did you feel like you was open to talk about it, even though you'd heard that from your mum? And was it always on your mind, or did you just get back into like, actually, there's the dream, get to the dream?
And no, that's a really good question and well put, because I can answer both, because I very specifically remember coming back, work the Air Force gave me a good amount of space, especially the people who were close around me said, Rog, just don't come back to work until you're ready. But then on coming back to work, I realized that I felt firsthand the stigma attached to mental health and to suicide. And I couldn't even tell my housemates about what had happened. But the reason was different. There was no shame. There was no concern about, what they might think or anything like that. It felt like I didn't want to bring them down with my problems. These were my problems, my family's problems, and they were being courteous enough to give me space and support me in the way that they were when I came back. So, I was very grateful for that and their friendship, but I just didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to bring them down. But then, of course, over the weeks, months, that became this massive burden of responsibility when people would say, I'm really sorry about your mum. And what actually happened? When they asked that question, then I would flick around with my words. I would not be able to answer. I felt like I was being dishonest. And then I felt like I was betraying my mum as well by not just being honest about what had happened. So it was very strange and a horrible time in my life, to be honest, because I just felt a bit lost. And to answer your sort of second part, what actually helped me was to get in that cockpit and find my flow. Because, of course, in that job, it's pretty full on and you can't think about anything else apart from what you're doing. And then it's next event, next event, next event. So you have to be in that flow and that mindset that you could almost compare it to mindfulness. There's nothing else you can think about. So therefore, just crack on and be the best pilot I could be. And I was able to just transfer all that negativity into this. I'm going to be the best person in that cockpit as I can. But then, after doing that for a while, this responsibility was too much. I felt it on my shoulders. So I decided that I could do something about it. And as an instructor, I was able to take photos from the rear cockpit of the Hawk. So I had these like really cool photos. And I was like, well, okay, I'm going to sell these and I'm going to raise money for charity. And I'm going to use that and good old social media as a platform to tell the world what has actually happened to my mum. And with the blessing of my sisters and my dad, then I went for it. And then that's where my campaigning began.
Mm. And just to clear, so you're an instructor instructing, so like a new instructor, just qualified, instructing the guys, and then you're using, was that fine? Was the RAF cool with that? You taking pictures? Is that a done thing?
Yeah, as long as the captain, it depends on the aircraft. Like you can never do that in the Typhoon unless you've got specific authority. So it does depend on the aircraft type, and actually those rules have probably changed now. But yes, at the time, as a captain, you could allow photographs to be taken in the cockpit. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, just if you want to hear a story that you should not be taking pictures, go listen to Nathan Jones's podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Can I move us then, mate, to 2013? You qualified as a Typhoon pilot. Again, the big moment in your life, you kind of ticked a box. Was it everything you expected it to be? Did you feel like 10 men?
I did, absolutely. It was something, as you know, and I've said already probably about 10 times, that it was my ultimate ambition, my dream. So the first time, you do a lot of the training in the simulator. And then actually the first time sitting in the aircraft on my own, going, wow, this is not a simulator. This is the real thing. Yeah. And then going into full reheat and feeling that kick, because of course you don't get that kick in anything, probably anything in this world apart from maybe an R6 motorbike or something. This was like, this was crazy, to the point where, this is fun, instant enjoyment and passion, all these things, and then getting airborne and then starting to, get to the grips of the aircraft and what it can do. And so, it was everything I hoped for. But what I loved about the Typhoon, and I've found this about sort of me and the way I'm wired, is that you never know it all and you can never be completely on your game. You always make mistakes because it's a complex beast. And there's lots of different ways of skinning the cat, as they say. There's lots of different ways that you can command, something on the aircraft.
Is it a, firstly, I've never ever thought about the first time. I've never thought about, there is a first time when you've got this multi-million-pound thing and then you're off you go. But is it a pilot's aircraft? Like, I should imagine like the Hawk, you move some, it goes. I don't know, mate. Really,
yeah, no.
Is it a pilot? Are you? Is it a computer or are you the pilot?
So it is fly-by-wire, and that it certainly is a computer. There's many computers, which was really bizarre. Going from the Hawk T1, no computers apart from effectively a bolt-on TomTom is what we used to like to call it, which is our navigation unit. But that was a standalone little bolt-on computer, just like you get in your car. So it was quite a step up in that sense. And the Hawk T1 was, you would feel that you want to go left and you'd go left. So it was very much a pilot's aircraft. But then the Typhoon, it wasn't like that in that sense, but because it was incredibly agile and the performance was just crazy to the point where the SEP, the specific excess power, was incredible in Typhoon. It's almost unmatched, in the world. So in other words, you had so much thrust, so much power to weight ratio was immense, to the point where, the ability to get airborne and go straight up, that is just, it's the most bizarre feeling, but incredible. And the more I got comfortable and the more I was able to expand the envelope of the aircraft, then I really got to grips with it.
It wasn't 3 years though until you became, in brackets, operational, or your first operation. How does it, before we get to that 2016, can you give me an overview of how it works? Because the majority of people that have been on this go away for 6 months, Iraq, Afghanistan, wherever, 6 months, with a fighter pilot. How does it work?
Sure. So, the truth was actually when I joined in 2013, you then become combat ready after doing a course. So I was actually operational after about 6 months or so.
Okay.
But then, of course, that was where the Typhoon was, or is primarily an air-to-air fighter. So its number one role is to protect the airspace around the UK. So quite quickly I was doing jobs like intercepting the Russian aircraft, the bombers that would come around the Northern Cape, and we would go and intercept and make sure that they didn't come into our territorial airspace, or our sovereign airspace, I should say. So from there, that was clearly the main job. But then, of course, everything started happening with Daesh in Syria and Iraq. And then there was that vote where they were voting for whether aircraft went into Syria. And then that is what then became the stepping stone for the Typhoons to actually now go and operate as a multi-role fighter.
I was in a Starbucks the day after that vote, and David Cameron was in there. I was in the queue with David Cameron and his kids, and that was the very first time, mate, I thought he is a dad and a human being as well.
Exactly.
But making these decisions that would have affected you at that time.
And it certainly did. And I was utterly glued to the TV watching that, because I knew it was everybody knew on the Typhoon Force that this was going to affect them in a major way, because the Typhoon was, it was going to be an air-to-air fighter that would deal with a lot of this, mainly intercepting the Russians and patrolling the airspace. But then in an air-to-ground role, yes, it could do that, but it wasn't very experienced in that sort of sphere, in that discipline. There was Libya that happened, and that is where the Typhoon did quite a lot of work, but that was alongside the Tornado GR4. But then, it got more and more, and then that was when it really started to do close air support as one of its main roles, as Operation Shader over in Iraq and Syria.
So we have a new generation of fighter pilot. You're with that generation doing this role that is differing now from what it was meant to be. 2016 then, you were written up and awarded the DFC. What is the DFC?
So the Distinguished Flying Cross.
And can you tell me from the morning or the period of time before, and then tell me what happened? I don't know.
That's right, exactly. So what a day in the office that was. So 2016, it was my first my first operational tour out, based out of RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus, and we were flying into and patrolling the doing the close air support role, working with troops on the ground, our Allied troops on the ground, over on this particular day in March 2016, because I'll remember it very well, over Iraq. And I kept a mission diary for every single mission, especially in that 2016 operational tour, because I heard from so many people who had fought in Afghanistan and been in similar roles, that it was amazing how they forgot stuff, and they just forgot the detail of what it was actually like and what it actually felt like, what they actually did, because it's so alien. You can't really compare it to anything else in my everyday normal life. So what I would like to start with is that when I landed from that mission, debrief, went back home, I completed my mission diary entry, and I said, that is the most rewarding thing that I have ever done in my entire RAF career. And I'm so glad to have been in the position to save people's lives. And that entry was just for me, and I've shared it with my dad. It was for no one else. It was just so that I could remember, and that's how I viewed the whole day, because I never knew I was going to get an award or anything. It never even crossed my mind, because why would it? I was just doing my job to the best I could do. But that was towards the sort of end of that tour. So we would, as a squadron, would do about sort of 4-month stints, and we would share it amongst the pilots, depending on what role you were doing. And because it was towards the end, then I was actually quite experienced, so I felt really comfortable with the aircraft, because, like I was saying, it's a complex beast.
Sorry to interrupt you. In that 4 months, how many separate flights would you have, or missions? I don't know what you'd say, but how many separate? Yeah,
good question. So we probably flew about 3 to 4 times a week. Sometimes we would actually be flying about 5 times a week, and the missions were anything between 6 to even 10 hours long. So they were
that long,
and that's actually airborne. So really, you're talking about your entire time you're awake, you are either briefing, executing the mission, or you're debriefing, and then you're straight to bed.
And refueling in the air?
Yeah, that's right.
How many times in 10 hours would you refuel in the air?
Say if it was 10 hours, you'd be looking at about 5 times. 6 times.
Roughly 2 hours on a...
It depends, because it depends what sort of, and what profile you're doing as well, what part of the trip. Like, for example, you'd have the initial transit to actually get there, which wouldn't use as much fuel as if you're fighting, I guess is one way of looking at it.
Can you go back to that day in March, please?
So, so that day in March where I'm feeling good, and I would always get up, part of my flow, which probably came from my ski racing, which I would sit in my bed and I would visualize what is the worst case thing that could happen, and then go through that and try and visualize and actually think about, using my muscle memory. What am I going to be? What switches am I going to be using? How am I going to coordinate and execute this attack? And then go through that just myself, just for me, just to give me that confidence before I then went into the proper mission planning process. And then you plan the mission. You would you go through it, and it was just everyday thing. Especially in 2016, on that tour, we didn't know where we would end up. We could end up anywhere in Iraq or Syria. We would cross the border. We would talk to the Joint Terminal Attack Control, the JTAC, or C2 Command and Control, and they would tell us, right, we want you over there. You're going to be working with this JTAC. So we never knew. So I very specifically remember being quite calm and really quite confident, and then checking in with the JTAC, and the JTAC just being stressed. And you never hear JTAC stress. Usually,
what nationality?
These guys were American, and I mean the majority of them American. But we worked with all sorts of people on the ground, as you can imagine. And this person was stressed, and he quickly responded in between some of his other communication with I think he was working with French Rafales at the time. And he said, push secondary JTAC. So in other words, go to the other JTAC. Went to them, and even that person was completely maxed out. We're like, oh, this is going to be a busy day. So we knew from there that yes, it was going to be a busy day. We're just listening into the comms and then trying to back up the other people who were in the middle of an attack. So without trying to say, oh, hey, we're here, everyone, come on, give us information. We're just like, right, we'll just back the situation up. And then straight away we got pushed to a tertiary JTAC, and then straight away with them onto this coordinated attack, which was a sniper in a building, and that sniper had just pinned down quite a lot of people because of its location. So they couldn't actually save other people's lives because they couldn't move because of the single sniper. So our job was to take out the sniper, and that got to the point where. And so you always operate as a pair. So you always have a wingman, and you always coordinate the attacks as a team. So you always have to do that. So you're covering each other's six. So obviously there's a point behind you that you can't see. So you've got to work together for any air-to-air threats, because there was often Russian aircraft that we would have to keep tabs on. So it wasn't just the air-to-ground picture. It was also the air-to-air picture as well. To make sure we know exactly who's there, what's happening, what's going on, what do we need to do for a successful mission. And at this point, went to go for the attack with a sniper, and of course, the first weapon didn't go off properly. So it was a Paveway 4. It didn't detonate properly. It was. It's a bomb. So it's a GPS laser guided bomb. And we were dropping on coordinates, so on GPS coordinates in this occasion, so it can be GPS or laser guided. And in this occasion, the bomb didn't detonate properly. So straight away, obviously, you can imagine there's a process, then straight on to let's set up and re-attack again, because we need to get rid of the sniper and help the Allied troops on the ground. From there, we got through that, a successful hit, and then straight away, even before we had finished this attack, it was actually as I am executing my run in to drop this second weapon, then my wingman is receiving the contract, which is a 9-line, to then go on and execute the next attack. So we used to take it in turns of who is the person who's dropping the weapon and who is the cover. So in other words, who is sanitizing the area, and are really working as a team to make sure that you conduct the attack as safely and as efficiently as possible.
How fast are you guys going at this point in the air?
So we'll constantly, for that sort of regime of flight, be about 400 miles per hour.
So significantly slower than the max.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. And because that is for a few different limitations for capacity, and obviously you're working on a separate point in the ground, but you need to have fighting speed, as we call it again. So if you are intercepted, or for example, if there's a surface-to-air missile, because that was there was that threat out there as well, or shoulder-launched missiles, then you need to be able to react to that. So you need to have a fighting speed to be able to get the aircraft out of that situation.
And how high up are you?
Well, I can't really say, but it's it's high enough to keep you out of, you're in the threat envelope, which means
you're not a mile up.
I mean, it depends on the different sort of. It depends on what they need you to do as the JTAC, because ultimately you want to be high enough so that you're away from the threat of any surface-to-air missiles, so that hopefully it gives you time to react, time to see it, and maybe even to be completely out of its envelope. But then you want to be low enough down so that you can actually see through your camera, so your pod, exactly the fidelity that you require to prosecute the attack. So it's a bit of a way up.
Sorry, mate. So then you're going back in for your second.
Yeah, that's right. And then, so as I'm going back in from a second, the JTAC is passing the contract, reading out the contract for the next attack. So, this is the
contract,
the 9 line. So that would, there's a few mandatory readbacks. So in other words, I say to you as an example, very generally, right, I want you to drop a paveway 4 or 2 paveway 4s on these coordinates. And then the JTAC would read out those coordinates, and then you've got to put them into your system and then read it out of the system to make sure that you know exactly where that weapon is going. Right. And you've made a contract with the JTAC, because the JTAC has control of where he or she wants that weapon to go, because they've got the best visibility and awareness because of UAVs and maybe being right there in the thick of it. So therefore, you're working closely with them for what they're seeing, but obviously you, as the pilot, as the captain of the aircraft, are physically releasing the weapon. So you've got to really work as a team. So, and that's where you don't want to hear a stressed out JTAC, because you want them to be as cool as a cucumber. So you have that confidence with what they're seeing, what they're thinking, what they're doing. And it's like this conversation, but at the same time, it's got to be very clear and succinct, calm, so that you're not wasting time, because actually usually it can be the seconds that count. So in this situation, going back to the training, we would often fight, train hard, fight easy. So you would train as hard as possible. You'd have these like multi-attacks, multi-directional, you're reading, multiple contracts at the same time. And this was exactly like that situation. So this was as hard as it was going to get, to make sure that we were prosecuting one attack as we were getting ready for the next one, and then flowing straight from that onto the next attack. There was not really any break at all. So from there, it was then on to the next one. And by this point, we were starting to get pretty low on fuel, because we'd gone from, the whole story of going between the different JTACs, going to this one, then having to prosecute this attack. And then there was a dud where the weapon didn't function correctly, and then having to go into the next one. And I was the leader, the formation leader, in charge of my formation of my pair aircraft. So it was down to me to decide what I had to do in the situation. And it was a really tough one, because when we then went on to the next attack, which my wingman was the one who was dropping the weapon, and I was the one having to assess the situation and obviously provide that sanitizing the area. And from that point, I was getting his fuel state, so my wingman's fuel state, and assessing mine and figuring out, right, how are we going to do this? Because we're now getting to the point where we don't have enough fuel to go and divert. So if we have anything wrong, we have to carry enough fuel so we can actually get to that airfield that is safe. And that's the key bit. To a safe airfield so we can land, and then get more fuel, figure out whatever the issue is with the aircraft, and then get airborne and fight again. So that's why we're always applying that safety margin, because it's, thinking of the bigger picture. But at this point, we're so low on fuel that we didn't have enough fuel to get to this safe diversion. So I made the decision to pick a diversion that was closer, so therefore we wouldn't need as much fuel, but it was hostile. There had been reports of Daesh who had been launching attacks on this airfield. And of course, when you're coming into land in a typhoon, you are a sitting duck, because you are slow. You've not got that fighting speed that I was talking about. You're an ample target for them. So, but then to put myself back in that position, the weight of responsibility I felt, because I had been told that there was people dying on the ground, that they were injured and they were going to die if we didn't get that weapon on. And it wasn't the JTAC applying pressure. They understood our situation, but that was the fact. And quite often you would never hear about that. The JTAC would just tell you what you had to do and you go ahead and do it. But because of the gravity of what was happening on the ground, and there was Allied troops in a lot of trouble, then clearly the JTAC felt they had to tell us so that we knew exactly, what was going to happen. So I opted to go for the closer in diversion, and then at the same time coordinated with the Voyager aircraft that we were getting fuel from to come and meet us, so for them to flow down south, and managed to create this. We're like, right, this is as safe as it can be. It means we can save lives, so let's do it. Check with my wingman. Are you happy? Because we're in this together, without that sort of chat, but just checking, understanding with them. Are you content? A-firm, right, press, and then get on with the attack. Of course, his weapon then didn't function correctly. So we had to go and prosecute that again, which obviously took more time, less fuel, to the point where, I'll never forget it, where the JTAC was like, so thankful. Hey guys, thank you so much. Thank you so much. You saved lives today. I was just like, just make sure you don't fall out the sky. And we're just limping, going, well, as efficiently as we could to get to the Voyager. And the Voyager were great. When I say a coordinate, when I think back, actually, they were listening into our communications with the JTAC. And even without me asking, they were already flowing down south to meet us because they knew the gravity of our situation. And that's what I mean when it comes back to it being a team. It was a complete team effort. The JTAC, my wingman, the Voyager, everybody had to be on their game and doing their job to the best ability and not fucking up, which is, how I view it. And then we got fuel, and it never stopped. We got fuel from the Voyager, and as I'm in the middle of taking fuel in through the, our retractable hose, getting fuel from the Voyager, then it was we're already actually receiving information of a further threat that was further down south in Iraq. So we're straight onto that again. Now it's my turn to attack, and we're both now full of fuel, so at least we got that comfort and that time, that space. But straight away, this is a similar situation, but in a different location. There was, mass attacks from Daesh and mass coordinated attacks across the region, and there was Allied troops on the ground that were completely pinned down, and again, they were taking casualties. And again, we were informed about this, so I was trying to very much focus on, just focus on the training, just do what you can do. Don't worry about anything else. You can only go as fast as you can go. You can only be as efficient as you can. So making sure I didn't rush things, and went through the whole, process, lined up, informed the JTAC, we're running in. And of course, I went to then press the weapon button to pick off the weapons and hang up, which is the computer telling me, bitching Betty as we call her, telling me that there's an issue with the system and a weapon's not going to come off my aircraft. So I am now holding on to the button, going and swearing and smashing the cockpit with my other hand because I'm furious, because I know there's people on the ground and they're potentially going to die because I can't get these weapons off my aircraft. And I'm feeling so angry and frustrated. And because we were quite early on in the days of air to surface attacks in the Typhoon, the level of experience was, we understood these failures that could happen, but it was then how do you deal with a failure? So in other words, it was something that I'd remembered in a brief, which was literally a combination of buttons, not that complex, but I had never heard of it happening before, and no one had heard of it happening before that I knew of. But it came up in a brief, like if you get in this situation where you have a hang up, then if you are in this certain regime of flight and you have a specific number of weapons selected, then you can do this. And it's like I obviously shouldn't say it, but a button selection to therefore skip over that weapon and drop the next one. And I got to the point where I was like, I kind of remember hearing about this. This all happened in my head in split seconds. And I just went, well, there's people down the ground. I'm just going to do this. What's the worst that can happen? And then dink, and holding then the buttons. And then all of a sudden, what happens in your head-up display, so you get this green squiggly writing that gives you all the information in the head-up display, that just disappeared, which means that you're outside of the basket, which means that you're not an effective weapon dropping zone, if you want to call it that, a launch acceptability zone. I was outside of that. And I'm now, once again, swearing my head off, and then dunk, and you feel the weapon come off, the weapon drops. And I'm like, oh, it's happened, right. And then of course, you just snap into right, next event, what do I do? And you carry on the process.
And that would have been guided in.
Yeah, that's right. And then it was a direct hit, and all these weapons had fortunately been a direct hit, and it had the desired effect. And there was a lot of Daesh fighters in this building who were pinning down these Allied troops who were taking casualties. So, and I remember just being absolutely elated that I'd been able to do that. I'd been able to do my job and been able to get over this malfunction. But I remember after that we had a few other attacks, and then literally had no more weapons left on aircraft, and we had to go home because we'd reached the end of our vol, as they call it, so our period where we are in charge of that bit of airspace. But I never forget flying home, all the way back from Iraq to Akrotiri, and just thinking, what did I do wrong? Because there was all this, that happened, and this happened, and writing things furiously down, trying to figure out the order of events. What could I have done differently? What could I have done better? Because I feel like that. I just remember this huge feeling of guilt and worry and anxiety, because I know I tried my hardest. So I kept reining myself in, going, I did my best. That's all I can worry about. But I was scared. I was worried, because quite often with this, you are detached from exactly what's happening on the ground. You've got an idea of what you can see through your camera, and you're hearing from the JTACs, and the JTACs were elated with our, what we had done. Mm. They were singing our praises, and they were, hoorah kind of thing over the radios. So that was feel good, but you never quite know what entirely happened. But then sitting and chatting to the relevant authorities in the debrief, and we got told from all the powers that be that we had saved lives, that day, and they gave us some really nice words, and told us that we'd done an amazing job. So it was an amazing day in the office, never mind getting the award or not.
Mm. I mean, lots to talk about there, but I want to take you to 2017. Same operation. Was it for you guys in the air? Was it busy and frantic? Was it the? I think I might know the answer, but I'll ask you. Was you getting a lot of experience more than other fighter pilots had ever had?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it was it was very frantic, especially in the tours that I did in 2016 and 17. It was extremely busy. And when you look at some of the map charts of where Daesh were and how much territory that they were holding, it was quite something. And in 17, the main focus of our efforts was to help the Allied troops on the ground take back Mosul and in Iraq and Raqqa in Syria, because of the amount of Daesh within those big cities.
And that battle in Mosul was horrendous, massive. Yeah. Human rights violations going on left, right and centre. It was a disgrace.
Exactly.
And a real stain on humanity, I suppose.
Absolutely. And the same with Raqqa as well. When you hear some of the things of people who have been to Raqqa and they see what a beautiful place, it was, and the amount of culture there, and then you see the destruction, and it is horrible to be part of. But then at the same time, I had a job to do, and that's, it felt like the right thing to do, and I'm happy in my heart that it was the right thing to do, was to get Daesh out of there and to save the people from them.
Can we speak about the moving target?
Yeah, so that was another really big day in the office, and it was actually my last mission in the 2017 tour of Op Shader. And this was again over Iraq, and it was away from the usual fighting zones of Mosul and Raqqa, like I've been saying. It was further south than Mosul, in sort of middle east part of Iraq. And again, I remember it specifically because we were doing some convoy support for Delta, who were we were giving them Overwatch, and that was down in Iraq.
When you said Delta, you mean Delta Force?
Yes, right. Exactly. And so we were, helping where we could and making sure we sanitized the area for them, giving that Overwatch and giving them that safety. And then we went from there, and we were told, right, guys, go and get some fuel, with all the standard comm, of course. Get some fuel from the air-to-air tanker, which I think was an Australian aircraft. Get some fuel from them, and then head home. And then, so at that point, I had, as the term is within the fighter pilots, is I'd checked out. So in other words, I'm on my last mission. I'm getting some fuel, and I'm going home. Sweet, I've done this. I can relax now. And then, of course, as I'm just about to try and put my probe into the basket to get, the retractable probe into the basket to get fuel, I then made a bit of a mess of it, because I tell you, that's a bit of a black art, like a dark magic trying to do that. Missed a couple of times, nearly snapped the probe off because the basket could have made such a pig ears of it, and probably because I'd relaxed. And then this call comes through, and it was actually the tanker who said, "Hey guys, can you just switch on to this channel? You've got a mission that you need to. You're the only assets in the area, supposedly." And we're like, "Oh, okay, all right." So we carry on with getting the fuel, going and getting this information, send my wingman to command and control. I go straight to the JTAC to say, "Hey, this is me. What's going on? Sort of give me the download." And the information was, right, we've got a moving target, and you're the only assets in the area. This is high priority. It's 130 miles north of where you are. So straight away, as you can imagine, I'm like, right, we need to go in this direction. Let's just absolutely go direct for it. And because this is a high priority mission, then no one got in our way.
Who's calling this in?
This was command and control, sort of via the JTAC, the Joint Terminal Attack Controller, who's on the ground. So, and it's kind of been some of it's been relayed from command and control because of where we are, how far we are from the attack controllers. So we started to get the information, and we're like, yeah, cool, switch back on, get that cassette in, we're back into fighting mode, take control of the situation, take control of formation, and make sure we know exactly where we're going, what we're doing, and trying to get all that information for the however many minutes, the sort of 15, 20 minutes it takes for us to get there. But then at that point, it started to dawn on me, wait a sec, can you confirm the speed of the moving target and confirm what is the target? So it turns out to be a Toyota Hilux. It's got 7 Daesh fighters in it, and they have been tracked by, again, I won't say too much, but they're in they know where they've come from and what they're going to do, and that intelligence is solid. You've been given the authority to attack. So instantly, this is the kind of thing in a Typhoon at that point where we had Paveway 4s. We didn't have the Brimstone missiles, which is a missile which is far more capable of doing moving targets. With a Paveway 4 in that environment, you've got to drop it, and it's got to follow the laser to then impact the target. So of course, if you've got a moving target, then that becomes a bit of an art. But it's an art that you can never practice for real. You can't practice it down a range, like in the UK. So the only way you can practice it is in the UK, is in the simulator. And I remember, because I always had this ethos that was drummed into me from ski racing and other things that had happened, mostly from my failures. And, I was like, I'll never let that happen again. So I'm going to be as good as I possibly can be. So the guys in the simulator, the instructors in the simulator, used to take the piss out of me because I would be in there all the time. And I would just be practice, just repeat. And I would just get it as right as I could be. And they're like, this is never going to happen.
The moving target?
Yeah.
You would practice moving target, even though it was never going to happen?
Yes, because everyone thought that, maybe it'll happen, but it'll be like a vehicle going, say, 5 miles per hour or something. And I was now in this position where there was a Toyota Hilux with high priority Daesh fighters on there, and there was very strong intelligence, and that was all passed to me. I had been given the authority to attack from above me. So, all right, I'm actually doing this. What everyone thought that would be the sort of worst case scenario, I'm now faced with this worst case scenario, and I am shitting myself because there's certain things that you hear about and you think about and you think, there's deep down, that'll never happen to me. I'm going to practice, going to make sure that I'm prepared for it, but it'll never happen. Oh, wait a minute, it's happening. And then it was really difficult because of trying to get on, like, my eyes and therefore attack equipment, the camera, therefore the attack system pinpointed down into this target because he's going pretty fast. Not so relative to us, but of course, with the system that we've got and having to be passed, there was a UAV, a different asset out there that had eyes on, and it was tracking it, but it didn't have the weapons to attack. We had the weapons to attack, so it had to pass the intelligence and the coordinates of where it was to us so that we could therefore attack. And you always want to get your wingman in there as well so that you can both back each other up. But this was very difficult to get eyes on mostly because of the timeline, because it was very high priority. And if I was to delay the attack at all, then he would have been in a built-up residential area. And of course, that is not a safe place for me to drop a weapon, unless they've sanitized it and they know it's there's no civilians there. But this car at the point was like in the middle of the desert, and there was a massive dust trail coming off the back of it. So I managed to get my system onto it because I knew I didn't have my wingman, was not able to help. So I had to coordinate him sort of out the way, but then just helping with general sanitization of the area and the airspace command and control. And then I had to work closely with the JTAC and the UAV to figure out exactly what's going on here and coming up with that contract that I spoke about, but knowing that this was a very difficult target. So if I missed, what is the follow-on game plan?
And what's the time between the fueling and what we're talking about right now?
Yeah, so this probably ended up being, I think it was around about 20 minutes. But as you can imagine, probably 15 minutes of that is the time to transit. And then the time to actually get the attack system onto the target, and then to use the correct geometry. So in other words, to make sure that you, in this case, attack the target from head on, because of the type of attack and the weapon you're using. So therefore,
I just assumed you was going to go behind it.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going in front.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it depends. It depends on the different weapons and different scenarios. But you need to make sure that you get yourself and you give yourself the best chance, obviously, of executing a successful attack. And I'll never forget, because as I'm setting up for this attack, and then I come around the corner and you know exactly what's happening, and there's on the throttle that you've got, on those laptops, you don't have like a trackpad, but you had that like rubbery, which was the mouse, to move the cursor around. That's what you have to therefore guide this weapon in when you're doing 400 miles per hour, trying to fly the aircraft, but then stare at this screen that's pretty tiny, and therefore obviously the car, the Toyota Hilux, is even smaller, and know exactly where to put that weapon in and place it, correctly. So honestly, in my head, I'm like, I'm not going to hit this. I'm going to try my best. That's all I can do. And I'm going to be open and honest about that for whatever happens from now on in. And I was saying to the JTAC, look, I don't think I'm going to hit this, but I'm going to try my damnedest, so let's do this. I had conviction that I could to do it, because I know I tried as much as I'd practice in the simulator. So here we go. And as I'm running in, make a couple of mistakes, but the priority was to track that car and get that weapon off. And then the final sort of few seconds, absolutely nail that laser pinpoint of where that weapon's going to go. I'll never forget it, because when I saw the weapon explode, the detonation, and I see the dust cloud come up, and I then see this carcass of a car come skidding out, and it's completely static. The JTAC is just losing his mind. He's just like, that was the best thing I've ever seen. And that's usually, they don't say anything on the radio because it's very professional. And he was like just waxing lyrical. And I just go into, I feel like I've got like lightning bolts coming out of my fingers because the adrenaline was just surging through my body. I'll never forget that moment. But I went straight into, right, Rog, don't fuck up. Next event. What do you do next? I tried to just park that. I was like, I'll celebrate later. But then, but it brings me on to the point where, just saying that word, celebrating, celebrating taking someone's life. But that I just have to say, that's how these things go. The emotions, how you get caught up into that moment. You're there for a reason, and I'm happy with the job that I was doing and what I was doing. And I was celebrating that moment because I managed to do the job that I was given, and I'm so glad that, again, I didn't fuck up because the pressure was on.
I mean, I was congratulating you there and thinking about it. I feel like now we need to go to a beach, take our tops off and play volleyball for the next 20 minutes.
With the dog tags as well. Yeah. Don't forget the dog tags.
And that was one chance. You had one chance to hit that.
Yeah, pretty much, because if that had not worked, or if I had let them go any further west as it was, then I wouldn't have had the opportunity. So I really felt the pressure, and I'm really again very grateful for how much of a team there was, like for how we coordinated attack. Because I dropped the weapon, but I tell you, there was this sort of the contract where we're just having to speak in plain English and go, all right, guys, this is going to be a tricky one, and the JTAC was bigging me up. He's like, you got this, man. It was like that sort of stuff where it was like, we're in this together. We can do this. It was that was coming across.
It's a running theme, really, isn't it? People being there to support you, having the right team around you.
Absolutely.
But also just giving it your best. You go back to the surgeon. I want to give it my best with the time I've got.
Yeah.
You go back to, you fighting ISIS, Daesh, and I want to give it my best and do with the time I've got and the stuff I've got around me.
Yeah.
But prior to all that are the unseen hours, countless hours of practice and drumming in and repetition and doing all the stuff people are telling you that you may never ever use, but professionally you're getting yourself prepared. Yeah. And prepared is where I want to go before we end this. So you've talked a lot about, especially in that midsection of this is a real tale of three halves, this podcast, really, mate. And but there's a theme, and that's, and I'm taking this out of what you've been saying, is you've talked about psychological fitness and mental health, and you've talked about good, positive, almost clarity, really, and instilling good things into you and giving yourself dreams that have turned into goals and that have turned into habits and repetition. How does that impact you now in terms of, let's say, performance in business, in life, in where you go next? Is this stuff that we can take?
So for me, what I've realized when I really sort of look internally, and what do I want in life, I guess, is where I now need to, what I'm trying to figure out, because I'm leaving the Air Force, and I've now done my 21 years, and I'm proud, and I'm really glad that I had all these opportunities. But the best feelings I've ever got is through mental health campaigning and helping people in that sphere. People who are really struggling with their own mental fitness, with their own mental health. I've had to help people. I've effectively talked people off a bridge a few times now, and
metaphorically off.
Metaphorically, but as in I've had people who have got in touch and told me they are about to take their own lives. Yeah, they're in crisis, okay. And for me, they are, the toughest moment that I have to deal with, but then the most rewarding as well. When I can be part of that person's life to get them through the other side. So now what I'm doing is I've launched a business called Speed of Sound Coaching, and that is to mainly look at performance coaching and resilience training. But really, the reason for doing it is because I want to try and, through my experiences and what I've learnt, through the good stuff and the bad stuff and the ugly stuff, is to tell that story and also provide a different perspective. Because what I've realised, and what really helped me after losing my mum, was my wife, she was sending articles to me of people and who had lost loved ones to suicide, and of them telling their stories. And I realised that actually this life, we need to do a lot more storytelling, and definitely for people who have been through these shit situations. We need to tell that story, be open and honest about it, so other people can get a different perspective, and therefore a more rounded way of looking at things, which will then hopefully help them with their own mental health. It'll hopefully then help them to help other people with their mental health, their mental fitness. And taking that into Speed of Sound coaching, so where I want to go with that is to help businesses and to really help people within that to get the most out of people. Because I remember having an argument with a senior officer in the Air Force who was, because I have often got on my soapbox about mental health and some of the things that would be better to be done in the Air Force or in the military. And it's certainly getting better. Now it's all going in the right way. But someone told me that they were very adamant that, the military, it should be task focused and not people focused, because there's a specific task to do. But I am adamant that everything, any organization has to be people focused. Yes, there's a task to do, but the people have to do the task. And therefore you've got to look after the people in every shape and form. And you've got to give them that space. You've got to give them that ability to have their voice and to be heard. And then, that's more of a conceptual sort of look at it. But the way I really like to think of it is that actually there's tools and there's things that the skill sets that we can talk about. For me, it's cycling. That's probably the biggest thing. Cycling and meditation, that really helps me. And journaling as well. So that storytelling, dealing with all these thoughts and trying to get them down the page. So I think, looking forward into the future, I'm really excited about just trying to help people wherever I can and whatever guise that will be. And I want to do that using my story.
I mean, this podcast has been about 2.5 years in the making, and that's, for various reasons, it's taken that long, but always has been that driver of helping someone else. And yeah, we've got these amazing, fighter pilot stories and this fast air stuff, but really a lot behind that. And again, I've said it a second ago, but, making sure that people don't go where your mum went to, and people making sure that we can fortify our own health physically, psychologically, with putting good habits in and having good people around you and working towards goals. And there's a lot to be said. Roger, thank you so much, and we'll leave it there.
Thank you very much for having me.